Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, right now we're going through something of an economic crisis, but a few years ago everything was booming and we were talking about a different sort of crisis. People were talking about a food crisis. Prices had gone up astronomically. This was due to surging demand in developing economies and also due to greater prosperity worldwide. And prices had gone up so much that for some basic foodstuffs and some basic commodities, people were beginning to wonder whether they'd be able to go on affording them. And there were some food rats in places like Egypt and Latin America because poor people could no longer afford to buy staple foodstuffs because the prices had gone up by so much. And everyone was rather worried. People were talking about the end of cheap food. People were also saying that this was really made worse by our desire to increase biofuel production, because by producing biofuels we were taking food away from ordinary people and turning it into petrol for cars. And people were coming up with all sorts of statistics. For instance, one tank load of petrol for your average SUV is about the same amount of cereals as one family could eat over the course of a whole year. I don't know whether that's true, but it's the kind of statistics that people were talking about in those days. All very alarmist and all very negative, of course, but nevertheless an interesting point to raise. And there was indeed a crisis and a lot of people suffered. A lot of farmers made a lot of money as well, of course, and we shouldn't overlook that. Now, I'd like to look at one particular aspect of this food crisis, but not perhaps as serious as starvation for poor people. I'd like to talk about a particular group of French biscuit producers in Western France, Brittany. Now, that particular part of France has a proud culture and heritage, and they're particularly proud of a particular type of biscuit that they produce there. It's a bit like shortbread, if anybody's familiar with Scottish biscuits, which are, of course, superior to anything the French can produce. But it's very similar. It's actually quite nice, contains a lot of sugar, a lot of butter, a fair amount of salt. And these biscuit producers use traditional recipes. They're usually very small-scale operators, a family firm, sometimes just a husband and his wife in their baker's shop. And they produce biscuits for local consumption and also for the rest of France and for export. And these biscuit producers suffered tremendously because between 2005 and 2007, wheat prices went up by 40%, the cost of eggs went up by 30%, the cost of butter went up by 40%. And these kinds of biscuits need at least 25% pure butter for them to taste right and for them to meet the criteria to have that particular denomination and to be able to sell at a premium. And so this was a real disaster for these small mom and pop operations that couldn't really increase their prices by 40 or 50% because then nobody would buy their biscuits, but at the same time they couldn't make a profit at the current prices given how much the inputs had gone up in cost. So a lot of them went out of business, and the others did the traditional French thing and asked for a government subsidy from the EU. But since I don't have time to tell you all about the CAP and how government subsidies work, I'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you.